Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So, today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 14, entitled The Three Modes of Material Nature, text number 5. Sattvam Rajastama iti Guna Prakriti Sambhavaha Nirbadnanti Mahabaho Dehe Dehinam Avyayam Sattvam Rajastama iti Guna Prakriti Sambhavaha Nirbadnanti Mahabaho Dehe Dehinam Avyayam Sattvam Rajastama iti Guna Prakriti Sambhavaha Nirbadnanti Mahabaho Dehe Dehinam Avyayam Mahabaho Dehe Dehinam Avyayam Sattvam Rajastama iti Guna Prakriti Sambhavaha Nirbadnanti Mahabaho Dehe Dehinam Avyayam. Sattvam, the mode of goodness. Rajaha, the mode of passion. Tamaha, the mode of ignorance. Iti, thus. Gunaha, the qualities. Prakriti, material nature. Sambhavaha, produced of. Nirbadnanti, do condition. Mahabaho, O mighty armed one. Dehe, in this body. Dehinam, the living entity. Avyayam, eternal. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. Please repeat. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. Purport. The living entity, because he is transcendental, has nothing to do with this material nature. Still, because he has become conditioned by the material world, he is acting under the spell of the three modes of material nature. Because living entities have different kinds of bodies, in terms of the different aspects of nature, they are induced to act according to that nature. This is the cause of the varieties of happiness and distress. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Tadamayham Tadati Svapadantikam Vandayaham Sri Guruho Sri Buddha Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sahagrijatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakham Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Rishatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Sattvam Rajas Tama Iti Guna Prakriti Sambhavaha Nirbadnanti Mahabaho Dehe Dehinam Avyayam. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So in the last chapter, we looked in general at the material nature, the living entity and the supersoul. In this chapter we will get the detail of exactly how this combination of the material nature and the living entity interacts, and how these modes of nature affect us. So this is very important. We're all trying to take to devotional service, and we know this is a pure process which will lead us out of the modes of nature. But in the meantime, while we're still bound in this material body, we're affected by the modes of nature. So even though we have come to devotional service, it's very, very important we understand how these modes of nature are working upon us. That's why Srila Prabhupada has said this is one of the most important chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, because we need to understand this knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada's purport today is quite short. But Bodhijan, in his Surrender Unto Me, has elaborated on this short purport very nicely. And so I'd like to go through this a little bit today, because it's he so nicely describes how we get conditioned. So this is Burijan. Okay, so the verse again. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty Amdarjan, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So Burijan writes, the eternal living entity comes in contact with material nature and becomes conditioned by it. This is what Krishna has said. So then he rephrases that. He says, in other words, despite his desire for independent enjoyment, his existence is subject to strict control by the modes of material nature. So we came here into this material world. How and when we came is not important, but we came here because we wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna. Burijan continues, the fault which causes the soul's conditioned state certainly rests with his own independent desire. He gives the example, we can't blame Krishna for our conditioned state any more than a criminal can blame the judge for being put into prison. We have misused our minute independence. Out of enmity toward Krishna, we have rejected our constitutional position as his servitor. Therefore, we had to come to the temporary material world of illusion. All the jivas in the spiritual world willingly and lovingly keep Krishna's service at the center of their consciousness. So we want to be independent, so how can we possibly live there? Once we come to the material world, we need to assume a false identity, because our true identity is part and parcel of Krishna. So we can't be independent with our true identity. We need to assume this false identity, this false ego. False ego, which is like a reflection of our true consciousness within matter, is the covering over the soul, first supplied by material nature, and it is the juncture between our spiritual identity and our material existence. So Burijan is saying that this is the juncture, this is the point where our spiritual self, our spiritual soul, meets material nature, this false ego. So this is an interesting sentence. He writes, any ego identity in which we may imagine ourselves the central figure is acceptable to our perverse consciousness. In other words, we're so focused on wanting our interests that material nature will give us this covering, and as long as we can see ourselves in the center, we accept it. So this explains how come we've been through so many different millions and millions of bodies, and we've accepted every one of them as our own. We're in the center of this false ego. So based on that false ego, the elemental ingredients for both subtle and gross material bodies are generated. Based on such bodies, we become controlled by a specific combination of the modes of nature, and naturally become attracted to exploiting particular combinations of matter. So this is interesting. We think, even we come here to enjoy, we think we have a choice about what we're going to enjoy. But according to the ego that covers us, certain combination of subtle and gross bodies come, and that combination of subtle and gross bodies determines what we're naturally attracted to. So the modes of nature that come with the body determine also our attractions. Thus the soul constitutionally Krishna's eternal servant, full of bliss, knowledge and eternity, becomes attracted to the material atmosphere and conditioned by it. He is then strictly controlled by the modes of material nature and experiences self as it were made of temporary matter. So we think we've come here with an independent desire, but actually we're under strict control according to the modes of nature that come with our body. Which is why it's so hard, even when we want to change our habits and our behaviors, it's so hard to do so, because they come with the body. The psychologists will tell you there's mental neuron patterns that become habits, and that's true. By our association, we can change our habits, but there are some things that are very difficult for us to change, because this combination of the modes of nature is coming with the body, with the subtle body and the gross body. So Burijan concludes, every inhabitant of the material world has earned his prison sentence, and all are bound by the ropes of material nature, with the three strands of goodness, passion and ignorance, twisted tight to give them strength. So we learn in this chapter about these three modes. So with our body, there, as it said, this conditioning is there. So a certain combination of three modes of nature is there. But by our association, we have some ability to move between the modes. Later on, Krishna after he explains the modes, he says that sometimes the mode of goodness is prominent, sometimes the mode of passion is prominent, sometimes the mode of ignorance is prominent, defeating the others. And so understanding these modes of nature will help us to understand how to get out of it. And Krishna has also given us prescribed duties, which are perfectly designed according to our modes of nature to help us purify our existence. So I've got an interesting example from the Srimad Bhagavatam to have a look at these modes of nature and how our prescribed duties can help us surmount the modes of nature. So in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a story of Kasyap Muni and Diti called Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening. So at that time, Kasyap Muni, who's one of the Prajapatis, he's a very elevated Muni, and he has 13 of the daughters of Manu as his wives, and among them is Aditi and Diti. So Diti is a very interesting character, and she is a little envious. She approached Kasyap Muni and she wanted to have children, because all of her sisters have had children already and she hadn't had any children. So she approached him at an inauspicious time of the day. Actually, it was at the evening when Kasyap Muni was engaged actually in his ritual activities for the evening, the Sandhya. A very inauspicious time of the day, because at that twilight time, Lord Shiva and all his ghosts and goblins fly around. So it's a bad time to go to sleep. It's also a bad time to conceive children. So Diti is an example of someone who is very much governed by modes of passion and ignorance. She's very much self-interested. She's envious of her sister, especially Aditi, who already has sons and she doesn't have any. And she wants immediate gratification, immediate response. So at this time, Kasyap Muni, he was also swayed by the modes. He allowed her to pull him into the mode of passion. He started by trying to dissuade her. He explained how a good wife is a protection for the husband, How a good wife can protect her husband from bad behavior because of her good behavior. But he wasn't, Prabhupada writes in his purports, he was also somewhat attracted to have sex because he didn't try very hard, he didn't chastise her. Because she approached him saying she wanted a son, he felt a little compassionate, and so he agreed to her proposal, full knowing that it was a very inauspicious time. Her nature and being in so much in passion, and the time of the day, and the fact that his spiritual activities were interrupted, he says everything is against it. But nevertheless, he paid obeisance to fate, and then went to a secluded place with Diti. So afterwards, Prabhupada mentions that he was actually quite a follower of Shiva, because he spoke quite a lot about Lord Shiva, and that he was a little bit impersonal in his nature. So Prabhupada compares that to Haridas Thakur. So what we see there is that Diti was very much in the mode of passion and ignorance, and her husband was an elevated Muni who should be in the mode of goodness, but he allowed her to drag him down. So Prabhupada compares that with the story of Haridas Thakur and the prostitute. Now, the prostitute we know is in passion and ignorance, but Haridas Thakur, he was born in a Mohammedan family. He wasn't a Brahmana, he didn't have any purificatory processes, but he was a devotee. He was engaged in devotional service. And because of that, he was able to resist the temptation. Now, another story comes up in the 6th. Let me just go. Where did I copied something here. Okay. First, before I go on to the rest. Srila Prabhupada in the purport to whatever we're on, text 31, 3:19, 31 I think. He writes about Kashyap Muni. He knew that the child born of such untimely sexual intercourse would certainly not be a good child, but he could not protect himself because he was too obliged to his wife. Similar case when Haridas Thakur was tempted by a public prostitute. He avoided the allurement because of his perfection in Krishna consciousness. That is the difference between a Krishna conscious person and others. Kashyap Muni was greatly learned and enlightened, and he knew all the rules and regulations of systematic life, yet he failed to protect himself from the attack of sex desire. Thakur Haridas was not born in a Brahmana family, nor was he himself a Brahmana, yet he could protect himself from such an attack due to being Krishna conscious. So another story with Diti comes in the 6th chapter, where is again Diti and Kashyap Muni. So at that time in the 3rd chapter, Kashyap had said, Diti had come to him afterwards and said, very apologetic, I know I was sinful, I know I've done wrong, but please protect my sons anyway, please don't let them be killed by Lord Shiva. And Kashyap Muni had said, well, okay, you're a little repentant. No, they're not going to be killed by Lord Shiva. They'll be killed by Lord Vishnu. And she said, well, good. I don't mind. That's good that they'll be killed by Lord Vishnu, but don't ever let them be killed by the Brahmanas who he's going to offend. And so she was happy that they were going to be killed by Lord Vishnu. But because she was repentful, then Kashyap Muni said, okay, but the son of your son, one of your sons, will become a great devotee. So of course, those two boys that were born from that union was Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, who were indeed killed by Lord Vishnu. So after that, Diti was now even more angry at the sons of her sister Aditi, because even though the two boys were killed by Vishnu, she wasn't angry at Vishnu. She knew enough to know that you can't be angry at Vishnu. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So she was angry at Indra. She said, Indra, because Lord Vishnu was favoring Indra, therefore my two boys were killed. So she had another plan this time. She knew she couldn't get away with the same thing again, going back to Kashyap Muni saying, please have sex, because I want a boy. So she took on the natural role of an obedient wife, and she served him very nicely, and she worshipped him very nicely. And Kashyap Muni again became obliged to his wife. And he promised her, yes, you're serving me very nicely as the representative of the Supreme Personality Godhead. I'm very pleased with you. Please tell me, is there anything I can do for you? And then Aditi says, okay, I want a son who can kill Indra. And Kashyap Muni says, oh no, I've done it again, I'm in trouble. But this time he's a little bit more wise. He said, he's obliged to his wife. He's already said that he will fulfill her desires, whatever she wants. But he has a plan. He says, okay, I'll give you a son who will kill Indra, provided that you follow this vrat for 1 full year. It's called the Punsavana vrat. And if you fulfill it perfectly, then you can have a son who'll kill Indra. But if you make one mistake in this process, then instead your son will be friend of Indra. So she readily agreed. And Prabhupada said this is the woman's nature. Even though she had her own interests, she was readily agreeable to follow this process and become. So Kashyap Muni's vrat was a vrat of worship of Vishnu. His plan, even though he was not quite a devotee himself, his plan was if he makes Diti a devotee, then she will no longer want to kill Indra, because Indra is a devotee. Because he was thinking Indra doesn't deserve to be killed. So this process, Diti followed very nicely. She very nicely followed this process, getting up early in the morning, so many restrictions about what she could do and she couldn't do. Basically, purifactory processes. Always wash your hands and mouth after eating, never go to sleep in the twilight, never go to sleep naked, don't go out unless you're fully covered. All these normal good behavior. But Indra realized what was happening, so he had a plan also. So he came, because Diti is his aunt, so he came to serve his aunt and help her with her sacrifice. But his plan was to try and find fault with her performance of this austerity. So he wanted to be close to her, so he could see when she was doing something wrong. So he very nicely, he even bought her all the ingredients for her sacrifices, everything she wanted, he bought to her. He served her so nicely. And so she accepted that service. But she became tired after all this austerity. And one day she didn't wash her hands and mouth after eating, and she went to sleep in the twilight, which she's not allowed to do. So Lord Indra immediately knew that, and he entered her womb and cut the embryo into 7 pieces, and then into 7 pieces again. But this embryo, because she had been so faithfully worshipping Lord Vishnu, this embryo wasn't killed. This embryo was described was golden and effulgent. And it cut into 7 pieces, and then each piece into 7 pieces, made 49. And then the embryos, which were now 49 of them, were calling out to Lord Indra, please don't kill us, we're your brothers. And Indra realized that they were actually his devotees, because of course she'd now broken her austerity. So the embryo had become her friends of Indra instead of enemies. So he realized that, and he stopped trying to kill them, and he left. And then the babies were born, and this is the 49 Maruts. And both Indra and Diti were purified by this practice because they were so very nicely helping to worship Lord Vishnu. So afterwards they had a conversation. They said, Diti said, how come I've got 49 children when I only had one? She asked Indra, and Indra said, well, I knew you wanted to kill me, so I tried to cut your embryo into pieces. But because you are so perfectly worshipping Lord Vishnu, the embryo was not killed. Instead, you got 49. And so then Diti was happy by that. And then Indra and the Maruts went back off to the heavenly planets. And that's how, because this question came about because Parikshit wanted to know how was it that these people born in a demon's family got to be demigods. And this is the answer. Now, in this purport, we have something else, also about Krishna consciousness. We'll talk about this modes of nature first. So, in this story, in this part of the story, Kashyap Muni remained in the mode of goodness, and by engaging his wife in this worship of Lord Vishnu, he brought her up to the mode of goodness. In fact, beyond it, because she became a devotee. So this is just a little bit about how the modes of nature can be changed by engaging in our prescribed duties. And of course, Krishna consciousness is the best. Later on in this verse, we have the verse, Mam cha yogya vicharina bhakti yogena sevate sarganan samiti chaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpati. Right at the end, isn't it? Second to last. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So in this purport, in the 6th canto, Prabhupada is also again talking about Krishna consciousness. The Krishna consciousness movement is so beneficial that it can very easily counteract the material contamination of material nature, which results from one's possessing a material body. Bhagavad Gita therefore teaches, in the very beginning, whether one is a man or a woman, he must know that he or she is not the body, but a spiritual soul. Everyone should be interested in the activities of the spirit soul, not the body. As long as one is activated by bodily conception of life, there is always the danger of being misled, whether one is a man or a woman. The soul is sometimes described as Purusha, because whether one is dressed as a man or a woman, one is inclined to enjoy this material world. One who has the spirit of enjoyment is described as Purusha. Whether one is a man or a woman, he is not interested in serving others. Everyone is interested in satisfying his or her own senses. Krishna consciousness, however, provides first-class training for a man or a woman. So this is an important point. Krishna consciousness, we're getting training how to serve others and how to serve Krishna. Also, in our prescribed duties, we also have this training. This is part of the reason why Prabhupada was so keen on introducing Varna Ashram, so that we can teach the whole of society prescribed duties. Because as he stresses here, whether one is a man or a woman, he is not interested in serving others. So by the nature that comes with this material body, as Burijan wrote in his commentary, that we come with an interest to dominate, and we accept any identity which allows us to be at the center. So we're interested in serving ourselves, enjoying, and being served. By our nature, we're not interested in serving others. We're interested in satisfying our own senses. But even the preliminary dharma of Varna Ashram engages us in serving others. Because the whole idea of Varna Ashram is described how the different Varnas are like parts of the Supreme Whole. The Brahmanas are described as like the head, and the Kshatriyas like the arms, and the Vaishyas like the stomach, and the Sudras like the legs. So in this way, all the Varnas have to work together to serve each other in order to serve the whole. So the whole idea of prescribed duties is to get us out of our selfish behavior and getting us to serve others. And none of it will be successful, as we saw in the first story with Kasyap Muni. Even though he was a greatly learned person, it was not successful because he was not a devotee. Whereas Haridas Thakur was successful, even though he didn't have the material qualifications, because he was a great devotee. So that's why Prabhupada concludes, Krishna consciousness, however, provides first-class training for a man or woman. So in that way, Krishna consciousness is required even for Varnashram Dharma. But Prabhupada wanted us to establish Varnashram Dharma and for us to show by our example how to be satisfied living in this material world, in society. Prabhu yesterday was stressing how it's gross selfishness if we accept this material body which wasn't made by us without offering something back. And so even from a common sense point of view, we should want to offer something back. But the best of all is to come to Krishna consciousness and in that way work together. Then all of our duties become duties to serve Krishna. And of course, they are best because they're guided by the spiritual master. The spiritual master is the best expert to teach us what our specific duties are. In the Varna ashram we have material duties. In this age we don't even know what our Varna is. So it's very difficult. So we need help with that. And in our spiritual life we have spiritual duties, which in general center around hearing and chanting, and serving the Vaishnavas, and serving the deity. But our spiritual master can guide us best how we can combine all of our different duties. So the aim of this program that Srila Prabhupada has given us is to keep us engaged, fully engaged in Krishna service, so we don't give time for this material nature to pull us sideways. So he's given us a process right from the very morning when we get up. We attend Mangal Arati, we chant our rounds, we attend class. We spend our day in Krishna conscious service, and we come to evening class and we read Krishna book, and so then hopefully we will also think about Krishna while we're sleeping. So the idea of the sadhana in Krishna consciousness is to engage us 24 hours a day in Krishna service, so these modes of nature can't act on us. But nevertheless, because we're in material bodies, sometimes even though we're outwardly doing our Krishna conscious service, our mind is dragging us somewhere else. So it's very important for us to understand these modes of nature and how we can detach, especially from this false ego, understanding it to be so much self-interested and not interested in Krishna. So deity was successful. She became a great devotee at this time. Her sons became demigods. And Kashyap Muni was also very pleased, of course. She went on to have more sons. We don't have the story of all of them. Okay. Here's an interesting part. This is in the purport to the next one. Where are we going to go? Oh, this is in the same purport. Okay. Anyone can be purified by following the principles of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. For Krishna consciousness is so powerful that it can purify even the dirtiest class of men and transform them to the topmost Vaishnavas. The appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this Kali Yuga is especially meant to deliver the fallen souls who are always planning something for material enjoyment. He gave the people of this age the advantage of being able to chant the Hare Krishna mantra and thus become fully pure, free from all contamination. Once one becomes a pure Vaishnava, he transcends all material conceptions of life. Thus, Kashyap Muni tried to transform his wife into a Vaishnavi, so she might give up the idea of killing Indra. He wanted both her and her sons to be purified, so they would be fit to become pure Vaishnavas. So Prabhupada writes, of course, sometimes a practitioner deviates from Vaishnava principles, and there is a chance he may fall down. But Kashyap Muni thought that even if one falls while practicing Vaishnava principles, he is still not a loser. Even a fallen Vaishnava is eligible for better results, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Svalpam asya dharmasya trayate mahatobayat. Even practicing Vaishnava principles to a small extent can save one from the greatest danger of material existence. So, thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments or questions about today's class? Hare Krishna.
I'd just like to mention about the Varnashram system. If you consider your body and you think, okay, which part do I feel okay about chopping off? And then you realize that actually I'm quite happy with them all, you know. In the same way, you know, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishya and the Sudra are all important ingredients to a proper society. So therefore we also develop a respect for them. I mean, if you chop your feet off, you're not going anywhere. So therefore when you see the Sudra who is doing that service, you're very grateful. And that helps to develop a compassion and a love and a gentleness in our own heart. So that's why the Varna Ashram system is such a perfect arrangement, you know, because we just do have different natures, you know. I mean, I try so hard. Maybe one day I'll be able to do some garland making or, you know, sew for the deities, but I'm just not there, you know. I sew for festivals and I can cope with that. But in my mind, you know, I'm kind of like meditating on one day I'll get there, you know. So, but you know, I'm quite happy as well being able to just do it for festivals, because then that's when Krishna consciousness is distributed, especially the Rath Yatra festival. That's where the Krishna consciousness is distributed so liberally, and what Jagannath is so beautiful. So yeah, that's the Varnashram system is so vital because it develops a lot of good qualities in everybody.
look at all the duties, it's very much aimed at keeping us busy in serving others. Very much part of Varnashram is also grihasta, ideal grihasta life, and also ideals woman's dharma. It cannot be separated, and it's very important. But it's all aimed at engaging us in service to others so that we become purified of this selfish mentality, and will help us become purified so then we can come to the stage of taking up Krishna consciousness for those who haven't already taken it up. It's very important for us to... Prabhupada stressed more and more in his later discussions how much he wanted us to bring in Varnashram Dharma, because the modes of nature, Devi Hyesha Gunamai, Mama Maya Diracha, they're so difficult we can't overcome them. But if we engage in this process, which is given by Krishna as part of the Vedas, then it's a purificatory process. Of course, devotional service is by far the best and is absolutely required for Varnashram to work properly. But if we can use it as a process to purify people, then we can't overcome these modes of nature by ourselves. And as Prabhupada is saying here, Kasyap Muni's plan is that even engaging in Vaishnava principles, there's a chance of a fall down. We've never lost, but the more we can do to avoid this chance of fall down, the better. And to try and engage properly in duties that take us away from our selfish mentality is very important. And basically, service to others is important to develop. And in that, we will also come to devotional service, because we will serve the Vaishnavas. And we serve the Vaishnavas, we will please Krishna. And then we'll get the ability to come to devotional service. And then by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, we can become perfect. But we want to try and help everybody else as well. Any other comments or questions?
This is from a couple of days ago, when I had a little altercation with Janardhan Swami, who's gone now, but he challenged me according to my viewpoint, and told me to ask Brahmananda.
Okay, you asked
So I
Brahmananda.
did.
Good.
Brahmananda did not agree with Janardhan Swami's decision. And the Prabhupada said he was going, because his guru's business is to take each disciple back to Krishna personally. And it is in no way an arrangement to take a representative. He does it himself personally. So I just wanted to mention that in case anybody's listening, who was listening the other night. I also had a conversation with Mukundadata Pujari, and he also brought up the example. It's very difficult to understand the mechanics, shall we say, mechanics of the spiritual energy. For example, he gave the example that in Burwood Place, Prabhupada ordered to have those two asanas
Yeah.
put on the altar for
Narad Muni?
Narmani and Brahma.
Brahma, I think. Lord
Yeah.
Brahma.
Didn't you see them? They came for the kirtan. No, we didn't see them. Prabhupada. So you know, wherever they were also there.
Yeah.
So it's not like they also have a potency, so that they can appear at will. They don't travel according to our conception of time and space.
Yeah.
So this is the position of Prabhupada may be preaching somewhere. I don't think Prabhupada was on the planet when Sudama and Prita were leaving. But they sat up and said, "Oh, Prabhupada, you've come at the time," and then they left and then left their bodies.
But even a yogi can manifest in up to 9 forms. This is also in the story of Devahuti and Kardamuni. He expanded himself into 9 forms because of his yogic power. So what a devotee can do.
Yoga power
Yeah.
is nothing compared to potency of pure
Yeah.
devotee.
But even a yogi can manifest 9 forms at once and do different things with his 9 forms.
Hare Krishna, Narada Muni used to come quite often, to programs where Prabhupada was present.
Good.
He liked them.
Good, I'm sure.
Prabhupada also used to say, how could I possibly do what I'm doing if I didn't know that my spiritual master was sitting next to me? Who can understand this?
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for your nice class, but I had to come a little bit late. I'm just wondering about this Varnashrama system. In Kali Yuga, everybody is almost considered Sudra. So do we have to worry so much about this system?
Okay, so the reason why everybody is considered a Sudra is because there are no purifactory performances being carried out anymore. So for someone to be considered a Brahmana, a Vedic Brahmana, he should have undergone all the purifactic processes, including Garbhadana Samskara and all the other samskaras. So that's why everybody, even if they're supposedly in a Brahmana family, are considered Sudra, because they're not qualified. But we still have different natures. There are still people who are in administration. In Kali Yuga it's all twisted. But Prabhupada explained that even in other societies, even in Western society, there are people who are intelligent, there are people who are inclined to administration, there are people who are inclined to making money, and there are people who are inclined just to work. Of course, in Kali Yuga, most people work for others. So even people who think of themselves as intelligent are usually often classed as Sudras because they're working for others. But nevertheless, we should understand our natures. So, especially here in India, the goal for almost every parent is for their children to become doctors, whether or not they have the particular qualities or interests to become doctors, become a doctor or a dentist or an engineer, which is all actually all Sudra occupations, only for money and reputation. So it's leading to a lot of unhappy people. I've also been doing some research onto this woman's dharma, and Prabhupada writes about how important it is to know our qualities. He's saying that previously, before a marriage, the parents would always do the horoscopes of the boy and the girl, and if they didn't match, no matter how wealthy this boy was, they wouldn't allow their daughter to marry him. Because Mother Urmila uses this as an example of how it's just because we're born into a certain varna, it doesn't mean that we're a certain varna, even for women. Some people tend to think, okay, a Brahmani, she's born in a Brahmin family, so therefore she's a Brahmani. But Mother Urmila is saying that, no, this is why the horoscopes are important, because the horoscopes match qualities. And the qualities indicate compatibility, and because of this Varna ashram, qualities also indicate the activities that we're suited to. So if two people are of similar qualities, then they will be able to engage in activities together. Because also in this section from Kashyap Muni, we find that the wife is called the better half, because her duty is to do half of the prescribed duties for the husband. So if they're the same qualities, then they can engage in these services. So in that way, even though we don't know exactly our varna and our ashrams are even all mixed up, Prabhupada very much wanted us to try and establish it so that we can regulate society. he stresses over and over again the whole concept of woman's dharma as protection of women is because the mixing of men and women is what leads to our entanglement in this material world. Because, even explained in the Bhagavad Gita, the biggest attachment in the material world is the sex, this attraction between men and women. Because it then leads to all the rest of society's activities. It leads to taking families, homes, jobs, wanting income, wanting this, wanting that. And everything, if we don't regulate our lives by following prescribed duties, it's all self-interested, like we can see in the Western society. Doctors. Everyone wants doctors and engineers because they make money. And it's all about gratifying senses. And it all makes us become more and more entangled in this material world. So our hope for purification is to try and regulate our lives. So Prabhupada instituted Brahmacharini Ashram in America when he was there, even though it's not a Vedic concept. But he did so in order to bring about this separation between men and women, so that men and women could regulate their lives and become fixed in devotional service and not be sidetracked by this different attractions, by selfish desires, wanting to find somewhere, wanting to be comfortable, wanting everything for ourselves. So by separating and by fixing us fully in devotional practice, without a break, then we can come to Krishna consciousness. Otherwise it's very, very difficult. So we can say that everyone's born a Sudra, and yes they are. But we have to try and help them purify their lives and not just let it remain a life of, Prabhupada calls it cats and dogs civilization, animal civilization, where everybody is simply mixing freely, where everybody is simply self-interested in exploiting others. Men are exploiting women, women are exploiting men, countries are exploiting countries, nations exploiting nations. Everybody's trying to exploit. Everybody's exploiting the natural resources, the earth, everything. The whole interest is exploitation. So yeah, we want to stop that. We want to establish regulated principles that will help to purify lives and bring everybody to a pure state where they can take up Krishna consciousness. You have some more comment?
Thank you very much.
Okay, Latika. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you.